All right, we are live. Okie doke. So, welcome back. Oh, we got a couple people in the waiting room. You got that, Verena?
Yeah, I'm doing waiting
Cool.
room. This is busy.
Thank you. So, thanks for spending some time with us today. Those of you who are regulars or you know what we're up to, and if you're new, maybe you saw on Twitter, we are gathering from different corners of K20, maybe pre-K20, I'm not sure, to learn how to pivot and support each other, brainstorm, discuss ideas about what we're doing in education now that we're in this emergency remote scenario. But then, of course, as keeps coming up, like looking at all the ways that a lot of the good ideas that we're relying on have been around for a long time, but we might be having trouble implementing them now. And then also looking ahead to, okay, so maybe this is the moment where people like us can try to champion some ideas that we can use to change education forever, for good, and all the things that we've been trying to do. And maybe use this as a case study to look ahead and go, okay, well, look, here's what we were able to do in these emergency situations and how we can make things better after we find a vaccine and figure out how to get kids back in school, physical, brick and mortar. So as we're talking today, if you don't mind introducing yourself, just instead of going around the whole room and doing intros, just when you have something to say, just tell us who you are and where you're coming from, and then we'll take it from there. So I'm Dr. Brian Sanders. Been a doctor for a year. I'm enjoying it, meeting all kinds of new people in my new professional network and capacity. And I've been working for 25 years in education, high school English blended with ed tech, and just recently reinvented myself in the elementary school space as an academic technology specialist. But that means so many different things. Supporting teachers, teaching classes for kids, programming, robots, Minecraft, computational thinking, all that good stuff. So where we left off last time was looking at the article by Tom Carroll, which is now 20 years old, and it's a great piece. If you didn't catch it, the links on my Twitter feed. But you know, if the exact title, if we didn't have the schools we have today, if we didn't have the schools we have today, would we create the schools we have today? So my colleague at Loyola Marymount University, Dr. Philip Molbash, in the last chat suggested that we talk about this, read this piece. He was here last week, and it's a great piece. So, you know, there's so many different aspects, so many different points being made in Carroll's piece that we should pay attention to. But let's just kick it off right there. So, you know, what are the elements of school that we would probably just instantly shed today? And, you know, maybe we've been forced to shed them because of where we're doing school, how we're holding classes. And, you know, what are the things that we just won't consider bringing back? Maybe we could kind of think through what's been happening in the last week or two or three that you've been remote, and try to relate it to this idea of, okay, well, what are the things that we actually never wanted to have in school, but we've been forced to accept them, and when we return, we don't plan on using them again?
Okay, I'm going to jump in just to help because I'm not good with quiet moments either, silences. I'm Dr. Verena Roberts. I'm based out of the University of Calgary and University of Victoria. I'm teaching some grad courses right now, but I have a job interview to teach grade 5 remote access this Thursday, which is so exciting, but it's also French immersion because I'm in Canada. So that's exciting because as a parent, I have some ideas about how I might do things a bit differently being on that end. And then working with teachers. And so thinking about that as well, teachers who are in the trenches trying to figure it out. But I would agree with you this week, Brian. I've heard a lot about how would we do this differently? Like, people are beginning to accept that they don't really necessarily love what's going on with remote access for wide variety of different reasons, but they're starting to talk about, well, what will it look like in September in particular? So maybe that's where we go to, like, thinking about future thoughts as well, not right now, because right now we're surviving still in different ways. But if we could do it differently, what would we take and what would we leave behind?
I'd like to offer a Yoda-ism, if I might. Do or do not. There is no attendance.
I forgot, which movie did he say that?
I just really think that that sort of showing up for 76 minutes in my case each day is losing its meaning, if not completely.
So you're struggling with the synchronous time? Is that what you're
It's not the synchronous part that's hard. It's the fact that I still just need to see evidence. And so you being physically in front of me isn't necessarily what I need to see. Certainly that would help for 3. I'm thinking right now of the 19 students that I have, but it doesn't necessarily have to work that way for everyone else.
I see. So you're talking about shedding attendance itself, physical attendance, looking ahead.
And it's not the first time I've said that. I've said that to a principal 10 years ago. You know, I think attendance could start to shift now. And they're like, no. And I think that's part of it, is that's the funding model that everything's attached to. Yeah.
Can I jump in on that, Alana? I'm Stephen Hurley. I taught for 30 years in, hello. I feel like I'm on the Brady Bunch here. I've got the gallery view here. As if the family has expanded. So I taught for 30 years in Ontario and retired for 7, and now hang out in this space called Voice Ed Radio. And it's afforded me the opportunity to have so many interesting conversations around formal learning, informal learning, from not only across Canada, but around the world. And I'm looking, though, back home, and I have 2 kids, officially my retirement projects. One's 13 and one's turning 11 this week. And the 13-year-old has really blossomed in the past 3 or 4 weeks. And it's because of my wife. She's also a teacher, but she has a really disciplined view of what school should be and what school needs to be for him. And she has them not locked down, but they're in this 2.5-hour learning space in the morning at the kitchen table. And he has blossomed. He's writing, he's reading, he's upstairs now playing the piano for the first time ever. And he's really doing well. And I think for him, and to your point, Alana, maybe it's not one size fits all. We've heard that a lot, but I am just amazed at what the discipline and the forced presence has meant for him. If it were me working with him over the past 5 weeks, it would have been a totally different scenario. And I don't think I would have seen the progress. So he needs that. And I think he's really appreciated it as well. So I think whatever we present or push back against, I think we have to take into consideration the fact that every learner is different. But the one thing that I would say is that I think we need to really have a really good conversation about the difference between formal education and informal learning. And that's what I've picked up in talking to people. I had a conversation yesterday with someone from the Institute for Learning Innovation. It was all about the 95% of our lives spent learning that isn't in school. And it's fascinating when you think of all the people out in the community, museum designers, art gallery directors, asking the same questions about, when learning really happens, what is going on? What are the conditions that allow it to take flight, and what are the conditions that can be replicated, and what's given over to self-motivation, what's given over to other provocations. And so those are some of the things that are both keeping me awake at night and getting me up early in the morning.
Hi, I'll jump in here as well.
Go ahead, Andy.
My name is Andy Knieven, and I am in Indiana, but I'm a 5th grade teacher. So, Dr. Roberts, I recognize you with where you're heading to. But I mean, the topic on attendance, obviously, the idea of there's a tie to school fundings and having all that part, in check, but also simply for student, safety, making sure that they're safe, that they're, there. I think that that's a big thing as well. That is an adjustment where I have students that are, changing between homes, or that differences of location. Even just this morning, having a call that a student is joining in from a city, 3 hours away, and so that we do have a difference in what we're considering our community, and we're beyond just a small bubble that borders where we live, but we're able to connect and really teach beyond where we're at right now, physically. So there's a big deal on that, but at the same time, the assurance that students are safe, that they're healthy, that they have the essential things that they need. So I think that there's still some degree of accountability for attendance, but I think there's a lot more to be said for grace for turning things in, and that due dates are flexible, and that there's not just a set structure like it needs to be turned in by midnight at this. And so what if something did happen, and we have a lot of equity issues of internet speed and usage, where if it's need to be turned in by midnight this day, hopefully my 5th graders are not up at midnight, but at the same time, that if it's not turned in at midnight, I'm not docking them any points or credit. I mean, I'm looking for their knowledge, their information on what they know.
Say, in regards to that attendance, hi, I'm Michael Walker, Secondary Digital Learning Specialist in Edina, Minnesota. We have had really strange things happen. Maybe I mentioned it last week, where we are actually seeing higher attendance across the board for the first few weeks of distance learning than last year, if you compare the 2 years. And the only day that wasn't higher was a day last year when it was a snow day and everybody was counted as present. And that goes with our middle schools, where they basically go to a Google form and check I'm here, and then go on to do their work in classes. And our high school, where every class has an attendance-based type assignment that kids are expected to complete for attendance for that day. And some of those are smaller things, and then they go on to the harder academic work, or continuing on with the work that day. But I wanted to speak a little bit to what Stephen was mentioning about learning. This morning, Will Richardson tweeted out that, as we're thinking about pivoting or the future of what schools look like, the first question we have to be asking is, how are we defining learning? And I shared that with some of our staff, and I said, I believe that if you asked everybody here right now, we'd probably come up with 14 different definitions of what learning was. And some of those, and hopefully not too many of them, because I think we're like-minded in many respects, but if you asked other educators, most of those would be instruction as opposed to learning. And so having that common definition, I think, is going to be critical as we move forward.
If I could jump in, I think it really means that.
As Stephen said, I believe that learning
A little Zoom hiccup there.
Yeah. If I can jump in then, I think it shifts. Right now, teachers have the class that they were assigned when they were in physical spaces. So the class is defined by the membership of those individuals.
Tell us who you are, Helen.
My name's Helen DeWard. I'm physically in South Central Ontario. I teach for Faculty of Education. So I wear multiple hats, but I'm in that straddle space between K-12 and higher ed. So I think in terms of who belongs in a class and what the definition or conception of even a class is it structured by age, as Stephen says. He's talking about his son doing things that are not subject specific. They are not tied to music class or math class or art class. They are things he's interested in learning. So it strips away the subject specificity. It strips away the need for age categories in classes, and it can potentially reframe what it means to belong. So students who belong to my class are students who are interested in what I may be able to share with them. So I may be a music teacher, and for 5 weeks, somebody's really interested in learning how to play piano. I can teach them, and then their interest wanes to something else, and you move on to, I really want to learn about, open heart surgery. Well, what does that look like in augmentative reality environments? So I shift my learning to fit my needs and not dependent on the age or the grade level or the subject. Some thoughts.
I'll jump in. I thank you, Brian, for the article that you gave us for homework. I did my homework and did read it. It's amazing that it was 20 years ago, really, because it was very progressive thinking. And my name is Susan Spellman-Cann, and I am in Calgary, and I'm a psychologist and a retired school counselor. I was in a self-directed high school for 5 years, and so that article spoke a lot about what Alberta was thinking and doing in the past, probably over 5 years, with high school redesign and with looking at how do we want schools to be different, and do we want to meld the learner, that we're both an educator and a learner. And being at a self-directed high school, one of the things, if you wanted it to be different, and I think all high schools or all schools, one of the great things that Bishop Carroll did where I was that half of the time was spent as a teacher advisory role. We've talked about the importance of connection and connecting with students and online and off, and how are we going to do that? Well, a big part of, for the past 40 years, believe it or not, at the self-directed high school was that that teacher advisory role was fundamental to how kids were going to learn, and trying to meld that learner teacher, who's the teacher, who's the learner, are we all learners, and shouldn't we all be learners, and how are we going to connect differently? And I think as we look forward, certainly in Alberta, there's been a lot of thinking about how it should be different, and trying to put it into practice. It's going to be, I think, become completely different in the next years. And certainly I think it's been catapulted into a change that's going to have to take place. There's no getting around it. I just can't see that a change won't take place. That's my thoughts anyway.
Mary, you want to jump in?
So my name is Mary Grant. I'm a high school tech teacher. I teach a variety of classes. So just one thing actually kind of resonated with me. So back in about 4 years ago, 3 years ago, Brandon and I had a meeting. I don't know if you remember this meeting, and we're talking about driving the bus. Who drives the bus? And that kind of resonated with me when Susan mentioned this, because yeah, the high school redesign, we looked at who is driving the bus being education. And so for me, I would love the kids to drive the bus and forward their education and go forward with that. But there is some kind of pushback on that. And we were looking at what are the roadblocks to that bus being driven by the students. And one of the big one was funding. And so if we want the students to take this more self-directed learning direction, which is happening online more, funding, I think, drives the bus. And so we have all these great ideas, but then how does funding factor into that? And then the shift. I love to hear that high school students and younger students, teachers are taking that shift. But personally, I'm not seeing that shift so much in the high school of where teachers are feeling that uncomfortableness of students kind of driving the bus. And so that willingness to let go of the bus. So I find that that's a bit of a roadblock. So the roadblock for me would be the funding, and then also the shift in growth mindsets of teachers to drive that bus. So I don't know if there's any solutions to those roadblocks, but maybe that's an idea I can put out to the group. So that's kind of my thoughts. Thanks.
Well, I could say a couple things that I'd like. My name is Dean Bennerman. I live in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada here. And I really like what Mary had to say. I think a lot of teachers still have a fixed mindset, and we're expecting the kids to have a growth mindset. I'm really worried that things will just go back to the way they were once everything settles down. I'm hoping that they change. I'm hoping that that's right, because I see a lot of teachers, they want to teach the curriculum, and they think they know exactly what it is. Like in a lot of curriculum guides, there's maybe 8 big ideas that you have to cover, and people think I have to cover that, and I know the best way to cover that. And we prescribe everything to the students, what they should learn, and they don't have that time to be an independent learner. So I think a lot of kids are even struggling right now with being an independent learner because they've never been shown that or taught that or allowed to express that. So I think we need to do a better job of making kids independent learners so they know how to do things for themselves. And like you're saying, teachers need to switch their roles from, again, that old saying, being the guide on the side instead of the sage on the stage. Teachers need to be mentors and coaches and lead learners. Like I agree totally with the point is that we should be learning too. And I've learned a lot through this experience. Just before I got on, I was with a couple of kids in teams, and we were doing questions together on a virtual whiteboard and having a blast. And it was great, and I really enjoyed it. So I really hope that we don't go back to exactly the way things were before. I hope that especially I teach high school, and a lot of high school teachers seem to be stuck in like I'm the content expert, and I need to show you how to do it rather than letting the kids guide their own learning or drive their own bus, like was mentioned before. So I'm hoping that again, this will be the catalyst to pivot, like this whole conversation's about, and that we just don't go back exactly the way things were, which I'm really worried about. But I love being part of this group. You guys inspire me, and I really love what all you guys are saying. So thank you.
I'll follow up with that, and especially recognizing the background that you have going on with the Minecraft. That I think that there's going back to also the thought of inspiring just an interest in learning, that we are all learners, and I think that there's definitely a shift of we as educators are wanting to learn more to reach our kids, and so we're challenging new ideas of taking on, teams or different engagement strategies. Even as I, referenced the Minecraft thing, that, I have been working on building a geometry Minecraft world and actually my goal is tomorrow to have a shared world that my students are going to join in with me as we explore going through this. And I've had to learn Minecraft a whole new, level of it, especially this year, starting new, and it never, logged in, hadn't, placed a block in my life until August. And my students taught me that. They were my experts. And so having that passion to learn something new, I think is what we need to instill in our students, that we're in a time that they can find information and learn things on their own, that is going to make them successful. Just like I'm needing to find and learn about, different command blocks and different things to make this world a success for my students tomorrow, and showing them that process.
Just a quick tech note. I don't know why for some people the chat isn't working, so apologies. I'm seeing if I can fix it. I may not be able to. We'll see.
Can I make a few comments? Mike Simonson. Mike Simonson, Nova Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale. I've been a professor for 40 years, instructional technology and distance education. I didn't do the homework, but that never stopped me before from making comments. So I'll make a few comments now about schools and what we keep and maybe what we discard. First thing I'd get rid of is testing. Second thing I'd get rid of is sport teams. Let those become external to the school. What I would keep is the school. Quick story. My wife's an elementary librarian in Miami, inner city school. Kids are fighting to come to school. They come to school to get their laptop that they're being checked out. Schools have been taught online now for about 3 weeks. Dressed up in their school uniforms with their hair curled, wanting to go down and just look in the classroom door. Now, maybe not all kids are like that, but that's this group of inner city kids that are in this elementary school. So the next thing I think we have to keep is we have to bring back the library and media specialists. What an important role they play. And if we all had them today and they were doing what for about 2 decades, up until about a decade and a half ago, they used to do, and that is make the technologies readily available and understood, not from a technical perspective, but from how you use them to teach and how you incorporate them into learning better. So we're going to need teachers, in my opinion, too. And isn't it interesting? Can you imagine life without Zoom now? Can you imagine go back to the school and you're going to say, oh, no, it's not like, I forgot my first love. I never liked him or her anyway. Can you imagine now doing many of the things we do and not say to myself, gee, I would like to do that on Zoom?
Say, Michael, to your point, our governor, who is a former teacher, yesterday was School Library Media Specialist Day in Minnesota, and we're very fortunate in our district that they never left. They're still there, and they're amazing. And so, but I recognize that that's not the case for everybody.
Something that's just happening sort of naturally for me, started yesterday, is to run a mixed grade level class. I typically have the mixed grade level happening in the off times, because of course everyone's running to the lab and maker room every spare second, like recess, who needs recess? Lunch, who needs lunch? After school, I'll never go home, right? So it typically becomes sort of this natural, organic place where all the different classes that we've set up just, break apart and kids find each other no matter their age or achievement level or whatever. So now on purpose, I'm creating that. And so instead of doing what we had done before, where I show up at the, we were doing like most people had done. Like, we had a schedule, kids are used to it, families are used to it, we're going to keep that schedule. Well, we stopped doing that. So now it's, 2:30 for an hour. You can show up every day of the week if you want, or you can go to the art teachers doing something in the same vein. And so what I'm seeing and what we're talking about, and just from one day of experience with it, it's like, okay, so I'm having a whole new education on, and this is my teacher prep program right now, live in real life. There's no class I go to learn and read and do assignments. I'm just trying to figure it out with my school community. And so that to me is like a really interesting thing happening that I think we could highlight, in the ways that, we go to teacher prep programs, but we never learn any of the things that we ultimately come out of it saying, oh, wait, I need this and that, but I didn't learn it in teacher. I have a credential, but I didn't take any classes on the things that I'm actually facing. So that's happening again in a whole new way right now that I think would be really interesting to highlight, document, focus on, develop, figure out together, how we, because this experiment, this accidental experiment can, I think, change what we do at the graduate level and inform how we teach teachers how to teach, or teach teachers how to be involved in learning. Maybe part of the problem is we call it teacher prep. Maybe it should be learner prep. But you get what I'm saying. Like it's an interesting time to look at just really live, like we don't have any time to do it. That's why I really look forward to these groups, because I get to think through some of the things that I've been hoping to have time to write about that I don't have time to write about. So anyway, I'd like to get some thoughts on that. And also, like, where are you thinking that we might, as professionals, use this experience to go back and inform the process, the program that comes prior to even entering the classroom as well?
I just want to chime in. I'm Shannon Tabaldo. I'm a professor at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. I teach in the teacher preparation program, and I also run the Ideal Institute out of the School of Ed. And you're absolutely right, Brian. We've been talking about this. I mean, the courses I teach are technology and urban education and digital technology for teachers. So the courses that I teach were really, really relevant to when this transition happened. And the feedback I got from my students instantaneously almost was, I am the most prepared teacher in my school because of Dr. Molbash, because of the course that they took with me, because of a couple other teachers that are teaching these types of transitions. They were prepared in a way that there was a shift, right? We don't typically teach for online learning. Although I would imagine that teacher prep programs now are going to be teaching with a focus of like, in an emergency, this is what you're going to need to do, or in a long-term, stay-at-home emergency, this is what you're going to need to do. So I think that teacher preparation programs, I have been screaming into the void on that with a small handful of you all too, we have to be teaching this type of technology, so that, right? Like, I really felt like I was just screaming into the void and no one was listening except a few of you all out there. And what ends up happening is now all of those folks are like, oh yeah, you were onto something back then. Can I get some more information on that now? And so all of a sudden we have become us, in this higher ed space, and in the teachers who have kind of been on the forefront of that are now the most prepared. And what we really do need to focus on, and I've been just fascinated by this, is what is this really going to look like? How is it going to translate into our teacher preparation programs? How is this going to, I had to pivot, because the way I teach my courses is, here's some concepts, here's some ideas, go do that in your classroom and then come back and show me the evidence of that. When we shut down, I was like, what am I going to do now? Because I was asking you for evidence. And so I was like, oh, duh, like how I teach online. Shannon, come on, put your brain together and just flip it for them. And so it was a learning journey for us to kind of think, what will this look like when it's not in the classroom? What is evidence-based learning? What is performance tasked learning? And that came up earlier. I think that was Helen that said that, is like, what does this learning look like? Stop showing me a test, that Michael said, and just go and do something that's interesting to you, that's connected back to what I needed you to learn, and show me that you know that. And that's really gonna, I think, how we as higher ed faculty in teacher prep can start thinking about, what are those performance tasks that we want our teachers to do that they could have their students do, and kind of make that. One last comment that came up is OutSchool. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's an online program. I think it's by Zoom, actually. I think Zoom is one of the founders of it. But OutSchool, I started looking into it before this pandemic for some alternative fun courses that my son could take. I have a 12-year-old tomorrow, and I was just trying to find something that he could do that was like Harry Potter writing or character development or mystery solving through, Star Wars, or there was all these kind of cool things that teachers were posting that were engaging, and but then there was also like cooking and learning about chickens and like you name it, it's on there. And I was thinking it's by grade, by age more than that, just because I think they're trying to target an age level. But like I look at this screen right here, and I'm Modified Brady Bunch. We all have something in common. We all are interested in this topic. If we were all put in a group by age, because we were all a grade, we wouldn't be together. We wouldn't be sharing these ideas or having these meaningful conversations. And so I think age is relative. Age is dumb. Like I don't believe in age. I think that there might be some different commonalities that you might share, but for the most part, if you're passionate about a topic, that's what I love about these types of engagements, these learning networks and things, because it doesn't matter. I can learn from the youngest of the young, and I can learn from the oldest of the old, and I'm happy to do that because you're sharing the common topic. And if we can teach kids that from an early age to be intrinsically motivated to seek out what they are interested in and to pursue it, we all have that niece or nephew or child who like knows everything about dinosaurs or trucks or trains, right? No one was like, oh, you have to go learn about trains. They're just obsessed with it. So if we capitalize that in education, I don't know. That's just my 2 cents. Sorry, but
I'm going to just jump in because it just really connects for me in Guy's notion of affinity groups and affinity spaces. And he comes out of the gaming, spaces and talks about, the resident expert, the master in a gaming environment can be like a 14-year-old teenager. And yet he's the grand master in that community space. So said age is irrelevant. Expertise is what counts. And my nephew, who is a dinosaur expert and can name every dinosaur that has ever been discovered and knows exactly the characteristics of every one of them, he would become the dinosaur master in a space like this for people who are interested in learning about dinosaurs. So yes, it's beyond that that notion. So how do we bring this type of collaboration into the lives of our students? How do we then become, as teachers, do we become the catalysts and the connectors for them?
Just gonna let some people, sorry, just jump in. So, because they've been trying to jump in for about 10 minutes. Tim, did you want to? Sorry. Oh, and now he can't. There you go.
Okay. There we go. I needed my unmuting person to unmute me. Anyway, I came out of IT into teaching. I teach computer engineering in Ontario, Canada, and watching this happen, I was talking to my neighbor yesterday, and he said, "Can you imagine if this had have happened on dial-up 20 years ago?" And he said it would have been impossible. But I'm not sure I entirely agree with that. But what this has really cast a light on is the resolution at which we operate in digital spaces. And our digital spaces, our bandwidth is much better than it's ever been. But I really, really miss the bandwidth of the classroom. When I'm face-to-face with a student, the amount of information I'm able to deal with, I can be standing near one kid to make sure he's actually doing something while I'm helping another kid do something, and I can't do anything like that online. So the remote learning thing, I've been e-learning as a teacher for years and years. I was one of the first people in Ontario to get into it, so I'm well aware of what it can do. In 2005, when I was doing it, one of my students was in Tokyo, and she had to get up at 2 a.m. in the morning because our exam was live and write the exam because, she wasn't in our time zone. I had another kid in Bangkok, same class. So I've seen some real miracles with e-learning, but when it comes to actual effective teaching methods, what we do in a classroom is light years beyond what we're doing right now. My feeling, whatever you want to throw at it, I think that's just the case. I think there's something else in this to do with the way technology has been implemented in education, where the technology always seems to be a bad reflection of the worst classroom practices. So you end up with people basically doing handouts on Google Docs and things like that. And you've got an entire different medium here. The way it works and the way it can work means we've really got to break those habits. But it's almost like education has infected the technology. So there are two things that are bouncing around in my head as I'm listening to this. And one of them is, as the tech gets better, our resolution will get better. So that is appealing. But I'm afraid at one point we're just going to have really, really high resolution digital worksheets, and because that's all we can ever do. And so I really like the idea that I'm hearing here of breaking out of that mold. But this has to come from two different directions. That's just how I'm feeling about it today. I said yesterday to somebody, I feel like I'm doing twice as much work to get half as much done. So, that's, I think, and a lot of teachers are starting to feel that fatigue.
We're just going to let some others who haven't spoken up yet. Jane, do you want to jump in? Or we have a new at the bottom. I think it's Scott.
Scott, good to see you, Scott.
Oh, hi, my name is Jane Waits. I'm in England, so it's quite late here, but not too late. I worked in IT for 20 years and a primary school teacher, so I taught 5 to 7-year-olds. And now I teach undergraduates, and I also do lots of teacher training here in England. And I'm trying to help our teachers make sense of remote teaching, which isn't the same, I think, as having a considered approach to changing education. And I think I'm getting really confused by lots of conversations that I'm hearing, because I agree completely with what Tim said, that actually there seems to be some very poor pedagogy, but at least there's something happening. And there's huge inequalities in provision and also in schools, which I'm sure is just the same for you in the States. And kids who are desperate to get back to school because they're too young to be left at home by themselves, and their parents too busy really to help them learn, and they may be no space or no tech. So I think that's the thing that I'm kind of confused about. And I wondered if any of you had heard of UCL's ABC process, which we're having a go. I'm seeing Verena going, yes, like this. We're going to have a go tomorrow at trying to adapt it to K-12 contexts, and to use their learning types, not to be confused with learning styles, in order to support teachers to have some clue about what the options are for them when they're migrating from their lovely familiar face-to-face to either low-tech, no-tech, or maybe high-tech. So I'd be interested if anybody has used ABC and if they've got any hints and tips to help us convert that for our teachers. And I'll stop there.
Can you send a link to that, Jane?
I was looking at, I know of it, Jane, but I have not used it as a form to convert, but I am going to check now that you asked. Bob or Scott, do you want to chime in before we head out?
Sure. Well, again, it's just great to listen to all these people. I just feel like I found my tribe. It's so wonderful to, people that are passionate about education and forward thinking, and it's just the best part of the whole week. Just a couple of things, the thoughts I had today. I just bought on Kindle Mitch Resnick's book, Lifelong Kindergarten, and I'm just devouring it, and I highly recommend it if you haven't read it. He worked with Seymour Papert. He's one of my heroes, and he talks a lot about the 4 Ps, and of course I can't remember what they are now, but passion is one of them. Passion, peers, projects, and something.
Play is the other one.
Play, Exactly. It's so amazing, and I see that, and I get so excited about what's being done and the possibilities that we have here. And then, I go back to my school where we're trying to replicate the school day, and I can see the reasons for it, and kids showing up synchronously and giving them assignments. And I know I'm trying to pivot. My style of classroom is very project-based, hands-on, figure it out, all that kind of stuff. Trying to make that happen here, which I'm having, I think, some success in doing. But I really think it's not whether we're virtual or physical or some combo of that. What we need is a revolution in learning. However, whatever the mode is, this is what I might take away from reading Mitch's book. So, for instance, today I was a guest streamer on Steve Isaac's Twitch stream, and I did a little thing on introductory Python, and I'm getting ready to launch. And I told my 7th grade students that I was starting a Twitch channel, and oh my God, in our Brady Bunch thing here, everybody was jumping up and down, and they wanted to know what game I would be streaming, and I had to disabuse them of the notion that I was any kind of a gamer, but so I'm getting ready to at least move my stuff into that area where they are. I don't think I can compete with, the big time streamers, but I'm going to do what I do and hope that it works out there. But anyway, I really think if we could kind of somehow, as Mitch says, you tap into the kids' passions, and that's why we're all here, is because we're passionate about education, every single person here. And you may be the only lifelong learner in your building, and every school says that's our goal, is to make lifelong learners out of people. I've discovered in my long career that there aren't that many of us out there, sadly, but I'm happy to be one. I'm happy to be with you all. And thanks to Brian and Verena for getting this going.
Do I still have a chance to add a touch? Okay.
Yeah, sure. But Scott or Bob, do you remind us where you're from, just so everyone knows who you are, and if you don't mind, Scott, me jumping in there.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I teach middle school computer science in Charleston, South Carolina, a private school called Porter Gallaudet, and that's where I am right now.
Nice. No, I liked what you had to say, Bob. I want to get that book too and check out the 4 Ps. I think I've read some stuff on that before, but that sounds like me, being a lifelong kindergartner, and I'm very much into PBL and doing that, and I missed that. And I'll be honest, I jumped on board transitioning from an ELA teacher role to an ed tech coach role, and totally saw the value of coming together as a team and having this congruity of doing some of the same stuff, at least to get going with distance learning. So I bought into that, even though that typically isn't my style. I did it, and the results were crummy, and that's why I don't do it. This one-size-fits-all plan doesn't really work, and it was so hard for me to give quality feedback. I'm like, this is such a poor design. It really doesn't work for me, at least for my style. Maybe for some it works, but for me it doesn't work. So I had to go back to what works. And so I just completely scratched all of that and started fresh this week. And so keeping it like real basic, low threshold, high ceiling kind of stuff, which is what I like. And we're focusing on poetry, something I'm super passionate about, have lots of expertise in, and I can give lots of pointed feedback. The only thing I wish I could change, and this is probably going to require more effort on my part, is getting more involvement from the kiddos. The stakes are super low. They are required to do nothing. The teachers are required to do stuff, but the kiddos are required to do nothing, which is fine. I totally agree with it, given where we're at and access and all of that. And, there are things going on that are beyond us. And so, for consistency and all that, I'm okay with that. But for those that can engage, they should engage. And the assignments are easy enough. I've given examples, and I'm using Flipgrid, and next week I want to bring in Wakelet, and then the week after that I want to do teacher appreciation messages for Teacher Appreciation Week using Flipgrid, and then compiling them in a Wakelet and sharing that back out. And that's something, if you guys would like, just DM me on Twitter at Mr. Nunes Teach, and I'll give you an example from last year.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, Scott's a good guy to know. Is it almost already an hour? We sure know how to pass the time. Can you imagine what a happy hour is going to be like when we finally do that? Oh my gosh, it's going to be like 3.5 days long. All right, so I guess we should try to take it out here, Verena. And so I will, for those of you who are new to our group, I'll add you to the Twitter list formed, and I'll just keep tweeting and tweeting at you, and let's just stay connected. You know, I think I wrote down so many notes today, and I'm kind of all over the place with ideas, so I don't really have like a parting thought to give out to think about in the next week before we meet again. But maybe we could just circle back to where we sort of started, and looking at, so, you know, if you haven't read the Carol piece, I'll put a link to that, you know, and let's all make sure we read it and encourage others to read it. And I think we should add Mitch and Dr. Resnick's book to it as well. Bob's right. That's a great book, Lifelong Kindergarten. Really, I don't think there's a single page that you'll have an argument with. Maybe you will, but you probably won't. I think the argument's going to be like, well, how do we actually do it? Like what, that's where we're going to hit the argument. So, you know, but I think the thing we should push on a little bit more, and Shannon, you know, you're really in the work doing this. Maybe some others of you are as well. But just teacher prep, like that's not like there's on the job, on a school site teacher prep, and like, you know, working with different tools and ideas, but like, I mean, before entering the classroom. And I'm really curious to see how we might design something together that could be, you know, I keep thinking about, I think together we could actually write a thought paper and publish it and put something out there, just to get, you know, like, we're not going to get any money, but that's not why we're doing this. We're just put the ideas out there, see what comes, and see what kind of change we can make. And so that's what I have. Verena, do you have anything else to close out?
My thoughts on that were just, as everyone was talking today, were it's not all about the technology either. And I think that like it's almost too much technology, and I fear like we were talking about, the love of really great things happening, or Stephen pointed out the music is coming back in, or I support sports. Like my kids are desperate to be back with their sports teams. They get a lot out of it, you know, competency-based learning and that kind of thing. So how do we, what I heard today were all the great things that happen in learning, which happen in formal and informal environments. And maybe we can look for that too this week. And I know I'm meeting with my grad students tonight, and we're talking about how do digital literacies and basic human needs meet? And what can we think about so that, I think that's how I'd end it today, and look out there and see what's going on, because there's some amazing things happening and how people are supporting each other and doing some things, and they might not have disease, but they might have been able to do it in different ways. And if I have to do one more worksheet as a parent online, like, oh my gosh. So if I can go outside and celebrate in the sun, I think I need a little more of that, and we all do, so in my opinion. So I'll leave you with that. And my heart goes out to someone special today, Susan in Nova Scotia. We've had a really tragic accident happen here in Canada, which is really weird for us. That's why I'm going to mention it's not usual these kind of things happen. So I'm just going to dedicate this chat to Susan because she needs it. And there's a lot of other people who need it out there, and for multiple reasons. So thanks, guys. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Good to see you all. See you out there.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Stay safe and stay well.
Bye.
Thank you.
See you next week. See you on the internet.
Fix the chat.
Yeah, I'm going to fix the chat.
Thanks, everybody.
Like the
Bye.
cut, Andy. Oh, he's gone.
All right.
Hey, see you, Brian.
Hey, good to see you too, man.
Thanks. Thanks,
Bye.
Brian.
Thank you. Thank you. Stephen, nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too, Brian. Let's be in touch, okay?
For sure.